getting back to Herb again, when Herb left, what was it, Jacksonville? I guess that was when he went back to the school, right?
Yeah, when Herb left Jacksonville, he came back to the school, and well, it was mostly through my influence, but I had gone to Commander Brenner, and we had a vacancy in the tuba section. I said, for heaven's sakes, let's get my brother over here. He's a good player and everything, and so that's when he came back to the Navy band, so we were together. And then actually, when the band went on tour, of course, they couldn't take the whole band. The men that were left behind, they called that the home guard. Well, in 1952, the year Herb died, I was on tour with the Navy band. We were in Brookings, South Dakota, and somebody at the afternoon, we were playing at a big auditorium at a college somewhere, or a gymnasium might have been, I don't know. But anyway, somebody came in back of where the tubas were sitting and handed me a note. It said emergency phone call. So without making a big fuss about it, I just sort of sneaked out and set the horn down and went out a back door and went into the office where there was a phone. And I got a message that my brother Herb had died. He was back in the home guard in Washington. So since we were right close to my hometown in Minnesota, I immediately, they arranged to give me leave, and I went home. And then I think they probably sent Sheehy from Washington back to take my place. In fact, that tuba that I was using on that particular tour, it belonged to Sheehy, and it had been to a guy named Ratliff, who was the tuba player on all these Spike Jones records you hear. In fact, he had a two-piece case on it, on that horn that said Spike Jones and his City Slickers on there. So that was the tuba I was using. When I went on that tour, my own tuba was at the factory being reconditioned. So Sheehy said, why don't you take that one? Which I did. It was a very good horn. It was a big Martin 4-valve top-action tuba. So when Herb died and I went to Minnesota to be with my folks and the funeral, so they sent for Sheehy. He came out, and that was his tuba there anyway.
Well, that's very interesting. I cherish that tuba that I've got over the house there, I tell you.
Herb bought that tuba at the time. I think he bought that. I think it was 1938, and he was already in the Navy band then, I think. And I think at the time, I think the local dealer, I think was Jordan's Music at that time, I think. And strangely enough, he never bought a case with that horn.
Yeah, that's one of my dilemmas today.
Yeah,
Not having a case for the horn, and I don't know that I'll ever have a case made. Tell me this, how long were the two of you in the band together? You and Herb?
Not very long. Well, let's see, he came back to the band probably maybe about 46. And of course he died in 52, so there you have it right there.
Yeah. So, well now, I came in 49 and he was already over school. So, I don't know when he left the band to come over to school.
Yeah, he wasn't in the band very long, when he died. Of course, he was only, I think he was only 40 years old.
Yeah.
But, he had asthma.
Yeah.
I can still remember when I was littler, of course he was 8 years older, when I can remember him sitting up in bed wheezing and couldn't even get his breath for that asthma. And if he was all right until he got a cold, then he couldn't breathe. And he tried to keep himself in shape all the time so he didn't catch colds. So he worked out with the weights, and he was 10 times as strong as I was, because he was working out with the weights every other day, I think it was. You never worked 2 days in a row, but he worked out with the weights, and he and I could wear the same clothes, but he was far stronger than me. But when he got a cold, he was in bad shape. And after reading his diary, when he got an attack of asthma, he would diagram it in his diary. It might last 2 or 3 days. Sometimes he didn't have a single wink sleep for 2 or 3 days. Not even an hour.
Wow.
And he'd write in the graph when it reached its peak and it went down and so on. But he was always afraid that he'd get a medical discharge from the Navy for that.
Well, I believe he was the one that introduced the method of teaching string bass to beginners
Yes.
like me at that point with records, because he would take the bass parts off of records, and he had this tremendous collection up there in his room, and we'd come and we'd do what we had to do in the Samando book, but the last thing would always be 2 or 3 tunes that I had to copy down.
Yes.
And learn to play pizzicato, of course, and when I come back next week, that's what we got to play, and we go through this. And I remember the Van Dam group was getting pretty popular.
Art Van Dam, the accordion player.
Yeah,
yeah.
He had some stuff out of there. I'll cherish those days.
Yeah. Well, you know, I still have one of the books. We had all these bass parts copied, but most of them I don't have the records anymore. They were mostly broken and so on. You know, he had. I had dozens of them in bushel baskets upstairs under the eaves, and most of them got warped in the heat and everything, and I don't have them anymore, unfortunately. I wish I did.
Somewhere I've got some of that stuff around, and it's lost like a lot of things are.
And also, we made a lot of recordings in the Navy band, not commercially, but they weren't done on, but they weren't permanent. And some of them I played so many times, I eventually just had to throw them away, unfortunately, because a lot of them that I liked, kind of, because I was on them, and I'd like to have them, but they're gone now, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten into this category of collecting records and things like this. I guess the older you get, the stuff means more to you.
Sure, absolutely. There's a lot. Most of them that I want, of course, are old 78s. In fact, there's one of them that I don't know if you remember the group of singers called the Merrimacs.
I do remember this name.
Well, they made one recording of The Way You Look Tonight. It was a wonderful recording, and I was asking about it. Well, one of my daughters, I guess, found it on the internet. In fact, she just sent it to me. But the tune I wanted isn't on there. The Way You Look Tonight. But they were a good singing group, very, very, very good. But the tune I wanted is not on here.
Someday, when I'm awfully low and the world is cold, I will feel a glow just thinking of you and the way you look tonight.
Well, that's good stuff.
They had wonderful arrangements. You know, it was a 3 men and a girl singer.
Yeah.
But they were great.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 on there where they're joined by Bing Crosby. I was never much for singers, but a couple of the things they did, especially that old tune they did of The Way You Look Tonight, which is a good tune anyway. It's not a tune that just got 3 or 4 chords either.
Right. Like some stuff that you hear around now.
Which reminds me, through another one, which used to, a lot of people who are not good at it, who could never fake when it got to the bridge, was Bob Hope's theme song.
Thanks for the memory.
Thanks for the, yeah, that's right, thanks for the memory. Anyway, it's pretty straightforward to begin with, but when you get to the bridge, I mean, it gets hairy if you don't know what it is.
Yeah, Skylark's another one.
Skylark?
That's got a pretty funny bridge too.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about Big Zeke Zeddy.
Arlington Zeddy.
Yes.
Well, you know, of course, he played flute and piccolo, and he became the drum major, and he was kind of a stickler for shoe shines and haircuts and that type of thing all the time.
That was his job.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Well, Zeke and Larry Weehee used to come over to the club there where I played all the time, and they would polish off whatever they were going to polish off. It was always great fun with those guys.
Yeah.
And, of course, I wasn't in the band long enough to well, I wouldn't have been involved anyway because I wasn't in the concert band, and I inherited this ceremonial band, Navy band Commodores, but I always heard the stories of when you'd be on tour, and this thing they'd sing in the morning and getting ready for the bus or something like this. 6'2", eyes of blue. Dun, 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 dun.
5'2".
Has anybody seen Zeke Zeddy?
Yeah.
Waiting for Zeke to show up.
Yeah.
And then he would always get there somehow.
Yeah. You know, some of those tours were just brutal. We didn't get any long jumps, and just they were I still remember when we played, I think, Portsmouth, Ohio, and we had a terribly long jump there, hardly any sleep, and I think we had run into traffic or something, and we arrived there late for the matinee. And I remember Dick Grove's mother was there to see the band, and of course to see him. And I still remember her backstage giving Commander Brendler what for. She said, I watched those boys when they came off the bus and came walking in here. And she said, every one of them is a picture of exhaustion. And she was giving him hell. She said, you better shape up, yeah. That's exactly right, you know. But I still remember that. She said every one of them is a picture of exhaustion. And we especially there because we had gotten there late and we hadn't been even to the hotel yet. Yeah. We didn't have time to clean up or do anything. But she was right. Some of those tours were terrible. And I could never sleep on the bus. Mike Borg, I remember he was sitting in front of me, in one seat in front of me, and his head's bouncing around, hitting the side and clunking, and he's sound asleep. How I envied him. I just could not sleep on the bus, and I couldn't read on the bus. I'd get a headache. So yeah, that's the way it was.
Yeah. Well, all that's part of it, and
sometimes we'd get a poker game going. We'd put one suitcase in this narrow aisle on end, and then stick another one on top of it like a T, and that was our card table. We'd play poker sometimes that way. Yeah. Or sometimes the bus always had a microphone. Sometimes we'd tell jokes over the microphone, things like that. But a lot of times, you know, we were out. Some of our tours were 5 weeks. Some of them 7. We met. One of them was 9 weeks, without one single day off, and that shouldn't be allowed. Really, we were just being put upon. That's what I felt about it, you know.
Well, I think that the circumstances today are probably a lot different than they were.
I'm sure they are.
At that time.
Yeah.
Because the band is much better transportation. I know the Dutch was telling a story on another tape that some folks will see that when the group had to go out to the cemetery, they get in the back end of an open truck. Yeah. And they take them out to the cemetery to play the funeral, you know?
Yeah.
So the program as it stands today is just worlds away from where it started. Yeah. And that's the purpose of this archive, to just give folks a taste, a glimpse of what it is that they have come into. Some never saw a lot of the things that they will see on these tapes. Well, we've been going on for a pretty good length of time here, and you've given just a wealth of information, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate this and how much folks somewhere down the line will appreciate all this information.
Well, we speak the same language, there's no doubt about that.
Hey, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that's we've got a lot to say that people need to hear, and this stuff will be around for a long, long time, and a lot of people will really get to appreciate the Navy musicians. There's some that don't even know that bands were aboard ship.
Sure, yeah.
And when the Navy Musicians Association meets down in Norfolk area now, it's been my contention that we should always have a band out there playing on board the Wisconsin that sits out there. We did it up in Massachusetts when we had the Navy musicians up there. Yeah. So maybe one day this will come to pass. But then again, I just thank you 1,000%.
Well, it's been my pleasure. By the way, my oil ship, I think I showed you some pictures. My oil ship, the New Jersey, that I'm a plank owner, is on permanent display now in Camden, New Jersey. Yeah. I'm going up again. One of my sons, who wasn't here when I went up there, he's going to be here from in just about 2 weeks or a week or so from here, he's coming from Aspen, Colorado,
Yeah.
and we're gonna go up there again.
Hey, terrific.
He went aboard. At the time he was living in California, but he went aboard the New Jersey was in mothballs in Bremerton, and there was just a guard. They let him come on, but he couldn't go around the ship. They just let him come aboard, and that was it. So he's very interested. In fact, he's kind of a World War II buff. He knows all about that and the Northampton and all that.
I just got a letter, as we close up here, I just got a letter from the Oriskany, which has not on this tape, but you already know that I was a plank on the Oriskany.
Yeah.
And they're dragging the Oriskany back down to Pensacola, and it's going to become a permanent reef, diving reef. There off of
is that right?
Pensacola. Yeah.
I'll be darned.
So that'll be something my kids can go down because they do a lot of diving.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll pass this along into the archive here, and thanks again.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, really.